Hello, my friends, and welcome to the next installment of the Divide and Conquer faction overviews, this time playing as the clans of Enedwaith. Now, I will give a disclosure. I have been playing a lot of the Chaos Dwarves in Warhammer Total War Warhammer 3, so my mind is currently still in Warhammer mode and not so much into Lord of the Ring mode at the moment, so I may get some things, geography mixed up, that sort of thing. I also want to say there are a lot of, I guess, Celtic names and location names, character names, and that sort of thing that I will have some pronunciation errors with, so forgive me for that. If you do know how to properly pronounce everything, I ask that you throw it in the comments below, and I will pin whichever comment has the most information on how to pronounce all like the character names, regions, and all that. So if you feel like doing that and helping me out, I think it would make the most sense on the Enedwaith overview video. But anyway, without any further ado, we'll start with your settlements, and it's pretty straightforward because you only have one. You have the town of Alkfood here in the heart of Enedwaith. It is decently well developed, and you do have roads and the fishery already established here, and we'll go more into the fishery shortly here. As for starting characters, you have Moot Speaker Tremak. He is your faction leader, the same Tremak that's been here in Divide and Conquer since at least 2.2. I can't remember if Enedwaith was in before 2.2 or not. It goes back a while. I want to do a history on Divide and Conquer and Third Age in the future, but that's not a topic for right now. Anyway, Tremak does not have any special abilities. He does have a biography, though, giving him some unique traits, and his bodyguard are the Mokaini and Baxtoy, not the standard bodyguard, but a decent bodyguard to have. They throw axes. We'll go more into the unit details a little bit later on. Your starting forces in Alkfood, you do have 2 Mordag Fishermen and 3 Mokaini Toda. And in a fort just to the west here, you have Chieftain Don Kaith, I believe is how you would say his name. Again, my pronunciation on these names is going to be a bit off. Don Kaith has Dubseath Foresters as his bodyguard, so just a nice ranger / archer general, and he comes with a unit of Dubseath Elders. So those are your starting forces. That is everything you have. So about, what is that, 9 units, give or take, or 8 units, so relatively small. As for nearby rebel expansion, well, you have a lot of options there. You can go south to Lon Angren, Karas, and to Balorn. You can go west to Siduri and Londare, though I would, if I were you, I'd recommend saving Londare until you've got yourself a decent number of cities, because it has a full 20 stack, or at least 19 units here in its garrison. To the north at Barradvin, I'd highly recommend going there. Aragon across the bay, Karas Nernaled, Bragost, and Dolvorn, Cor Willishar, and then also you have Bregnos and Gund. Though good luck with these settlements. Isengard moves west very swiftly in these campaigns. It's turn 2. Ugluk is already besieging this fort, and soon Isengard forces will march on to Bregnos. So Isengard very much likes to sweep westward, so my personal recommendations for expansion would be to go for Karas and then Lond Angren, and if you can fit the troops down here, take Balorn also, because it does have access to gold, which is a great mining resource to have. I'd also recommend go for Barradvin, and then also Harrot, because these unlock special units, so might as well talk about the scripts. As you take certain regions, you will unlock military units and oftentimes generals from those special provinces. So I'm going to go kind of clockwise here, starting from the 6 o'clock position at Karas. If you take Karas, you will unlock Kithe Huntsmen, Druidine Hunters, and Gonbury Gon as a Druidine Hunter General. If you take Lond Angren, you will unlock a Admiral with decent Admiralty levels. I think it's like a 5-star Admiral, and you unlock the Byre Siege Dragon Boats. If you take Londare, you will unlock the Leodan Spearmen and the Leodan Billmen. Taking Barradvin will unlock you Mordag Skirmishers. Taking Aragon will give you your Cavalry, giving you Fulani Herders and the Fulani War Wagons. And then finally, taking Dolvorn will give you the Dubseath Elders and the Dubseath Foresters, for recruitment. There isn't anything for Brigost or Karas Nerdaled, nor is there any unlock for having Viole or Bregnos down here, nor for Gund or Valorn. However, you will need certain regions to unlock the Tier Crosoil, which is in Tharbad, a very unique building, and I'll go ahead and load up a save here that has that, because there's not too much to go on here at turn 2. So we'll go to a save. In this one, I have conquered all the regions that you need to actually complete your script. So basically, it's those same regions that we talked about where you unlock your units from, each of those clan seats. In addition, you must have Dunlin's 3 core starting settlements, being Dunlarup, Dunyurd, is it Byrig? Is that their... Yeah, that's their capital, Byrig. You'll need Byrig, you will need Bile also, and Tharbad, which then gets renamed to Athamor once you build the Tier Crosoil. So these are all of the regions that you need. Dunyurd, Herat, Karas, Londangren, Londare, Suduri, Alkfood, Beredvin, Bile, Argond, Suduri, and Dolvorn. You do not need Burgos to do this, you do not need Valoran, and you do not need Gund or Bregnos. These are the core regions that are required for you to then basically form the Kingdom of Athamor, though you are still known as the Clans of Enedwaith. But yeah, that's basically it. So there isn't really room to ally with Dunland unless you manage to either trade them some settlements farther away from their homelands. There isn't really room to keep them. You must more or less destroy Dunland and take their heartlands in order to complete your scripts, but doing so will unlock you some fancy units. So if you go to the clan barracks, outside of the standard units, which we'll go into more detail on the battlefield side of things, you do unlock Enedwaith Guardsmen, Enedwaith Marksmen, and Enedwaith Cavalry, kind of showing that you are forming your own united kingdom of Enedwaith, and you are no longer just a bunch of random clans that were more or less independent. They have now been unified, and they are now forming a proper military, at least in some capacity here. In addition, you do get the Tier Crosoil Costantori. Again, I probably butchered these pronunciations, so please forgive me for that. We'll go ahead and talk about the military recruitment structure of Enedwaith and their unique buildings. So you don't really have a traditional barracks. I mean, there is the clan muster ground and the barracks, but typically in the early game, your units are going to come from your economic buildings. So we'll start with the fishery. This is Enedwaith's unique resource building. Anywhere that there is fish as a resource, you can build this. And as you can see, it gives you great benefits, 150 income, culture, population, and an increase in good, and then those benefits basically double here with the guild house, which also gives you a naval recruitment cost, I guess, buff as well. So it won't be super noticeable, but if you do want to play the navy game with Enedwaith, that 10% is kind of nice to have, because boats are typically very expensive. Outside of that, your other buildings, your other recruitment options, from the meeting hall in Alkfood, you do get your bodyguard. Outside of that, from your farms, you will get the Fowlon border guards here. The ports will give you, of course, the ships. At the blacksmith tier, you do unlock your Mokaini Toda, so if you want to recruit your axemen, you will need at least the leather worker. And then that's pretty much it. I don't think I'm missing anything here. Oh, the livestock farming actually gives you your cavalry as well. So if you want your Fulani herders, you are going to need to invest in chicken farming. And that's pretty much it. As for guilds, you do have the Archers Guild, which is pretty much your only option. It does give you, increased recruitment of your archers and allows you to train the Dubseath Foresters and the Druidine Hunters. Should you manage to get this before you unlock these guys in the script, then I believe you still are able to unlock them, though currently guilds are quite difficult to unlock currently in the mod as it stands right now. That's pretty much it for your military recruitment and unique buildings. Of course, when you complete the script, you can build the clan muster grounds and scatter those around. I need to check. What do you need? They just require a Great Hall and then a blacksmith and the Lord's Hall. One final thing before we kind of move on towards the battle map side of thing. You are locked to Tier 2 smithing until you reform Athamor, at which case you then unlock the blacksmith. So until you've completed the script, you will only have access to the leather worker. So if you are questioning why you can't have a blacksmith, that is the exact reason why. And to be honest, I haven't played much of Enedwaith in version 5. They used to be my favorite faction in the previous renditions of Divide and Conquer, but I played them when we were developing Enedwaith, and then I haven't touched them ever since. I don't know why I didn't have as much interest, and I hope that's not like having a bearing on the quality of this video. Again, I am in Warhammer Total War mode right now, and I maybe put too many hours into that this week. Let's just say I have put a lot of hours into playing the Chaos Dwarves, but that's getting off topic. I don't think I'm missing anything else here. Again, you can always just check the mission tab to see all the things you need, and it's great because this will tell you all of the regions. If you're ever forgetting them, just open this and it'll tell you what the region names are. And of course, those are region names, not the cities, so to check those, just simply hold the right mouse button on the map and it'll tell you what the regions are, so you can kind of cross-reference what you need there. But outside of that, I guess just general gameplay advice with Enedwaith. I would say, if you want to make it easier on yourself, you could try to ally with Gondor and get trade with them. They can make for a respectable ally, since you will most likely be fighting Isengard, since you have to fight Dunland to complete your script. Really, for the most part, you're just going to be fighting rebels and expanding for a while. I would say going for Kiros early is great to get the Kefei Hunters. You're going to want Herod to get your Fallon Warriors, as they are quite powerful, and I guess I can also show real quick the generals you unlock. So, taking Herod, you do get Melmedoc, who has Fallon Warriors as his bodyguards. Gon, of course, we talked about earlier. He has the Druidine Hunters, so a nice little nod there to the books. And yes, it is strange that you get, maybe a little bit strange to get Gon when he is known for living in the forest all the way over here by Minas Tirith, but they had to, we had to throw him in somehow. So he is here in the mod for Enedwaith. Here is the admiral you get for taking Lond Angren. So he is actually a 6-star command admiral, giving you a decent naval officer. In Londare, you get Erunestian, who has the Leodan Spearmen, and these are decent units. You don't get anything for Serduri. You don't get anyone for Dulvorn. You do get a Chariot General, Cororian, for having Aragond, and he has just the Falani War Wagons. And then finally, once you do repair and create the Tir Soil, you also get a General, Seathich. Again, I don't know how to pronounce these names, so he has the Tir Soil Cosantori, so a great general to have there. Probably your most powerful one, arguably. Probably even more so than Moot Speaker Tremak himself. You also do get some Dunlanding units when you take the Dunland cities, which I believe would be here in the Enedwaith barracks. So if I just check here, you can get the Warband Blades if you build that. And do we get anything else at the barracks tier? I don't believe so. I thought you get more of the... Here we go. So Blacksmiths will get you Dunlanding Raiders. I swear there were more Dunlanding troops. Am I mistaken? Was there a change that I just did not pay attention to? It might just be the case that you are just a bit limited on what you get. I could have sworn you get more Dunlanding units, but it seems I was mistaken. So, you only get a handful of Dunlanding units, being the Warband Blades and Dunlanding Raiders, but they do give you decent sword and shield units. I thought you had more, but maybe that is an oversight, because before you did get like 4 Dunland units, and now you don't. So, version 5 is still in development. We're still in an open beta, so I was pretty sure they were supposed to have more Dunlanding units than that. But again, I have not played much of Enedwaith in this version, so there is some gaps in my knowledge to the faction. But anyway, I believe that's mostly it for the campaign map overview on them. You are an underdog faction. You are going to have to play with your factions and your unit strengths and weaknesses to your advantage. You are still an ambush nation, so there's a good amount of troops that can hide, and you still do specialize with javelins, though maybe a little bit less so than they did in version 4.6. But that's pretty much it for the Enedwaith overview. You are true neutral. You can ally and have enemies with anyone you want. So we will now move on to the battle map side of things. And welcome now to the battle map side of things. So the way that we're going to do this is I will start with the infantry and the general, like the regular bodyguard first. Then we'll talk about the archers and the cav like we usually do. And then finally I'll talk about the reclamation of Athamor units. So I kind of put those off to the side over here since they don't exactly fit in with the rest of the roster. I felt they were unique enough to throw into their own section over there. So I tried to organize the kind of rosters by where I would approximate their tiers to be, but more or less a lot of these units kind of overlap with each other in the same general tier. So I kind of just put them front to back, kind of where I thought weakest in front and maybe strongest in back, but they aren't in like a perfect order here. So starting off with the General's Bodyguard, these are the Clan Heralds. They have a two-handed sword and an armor-piercing javelin. They do have 4 of those with very high accuracy, 70-meter range, and decent defense. Typically, Enedwaith still retains their identity as a skirmishing nation with plenty of javelin projectiles, though now with some throwing axes included. Typically, compared to other nations, they will have additional javelins, and additional range, and additional accuracy with their throwing weapons. So, Clan Heralds, not the strongest generals in the game, definitely a little bit weak, but I think they're better than when Enedwaith just had an archer bodyguard. I think these are a welcome addition / modification to the current roster. Not going to do tons of damage with them, just simply due to the fact that they are a lower... They're not like other javelin units where they have plenty of models, and 8 missile attack is pretty standard for a javelin unit. But they still are decent. They can do good damage throwing before engaging in melee with their claymores. So pretty much all I can say about the Clan Heralds there. They are vulnerable to archers and cavalry, though they do have a bonus against mounts as well, but I believe that's just due to their projectile. So starting with the kind of basic tier infantry, we'll start off with what I would consider the most militia-like infantry unit that you have, but they are by no means like trash. These are the Mokaini Tota. These guys are a 5 attack, 8 charge, and 6 defense axe unit, so pretty respectable stats, though they do have poor morale and average morale response. They are slightly faster than like other infantry, so they do have a bit of a mobility advantage, and it is just kind of nice to have a cheap armor-piercing unit that is at least with decent stats. I mean, there are obviously better units and worse units when it comes to two-handed axemen, but having just a cheap, almost 200-man battalion as your basic infantry and only needing a leather worker to recruit them, they are a welcome addition. They'll help you if you need to fight Gondor or if you need to fight Isengard. Even against Dunland and Dunland's respectable heavy infantry, the Mokaini Tota will serve you very well, and they make excellent bodyguard slayers. So, a good unit to have, weak against archers, weak against cavalry, but decent at performing a variety of roles. Just don't expect them to hold the line. That is what our next unit is, and maybe arguably these guys are a bit higher tier. These are the Faolon Border Guards, 4 attack, 6 charge, a decent charge for a spear unit, 12 total defense. Do note, these guys are completely naked, 0 armor, they just rely on defense skill and a relatively high shield value of 5. So they are very durable from the front, and they have the advantage where they are able to hide anywhere. So they can be used as ambush troops, or as just as troops that can basically hide and avoid taking arrow fire, though they can receive it decently okay with their high shield value. You're probably going to want to have plenty of these guys in your armies to function as a front line and a barrier to keep your skirmishers safe. So I would definitely recommend fill out your armies with Faolon Border Guards if you need a decent infantry unit, and of course they can get up to 3 armor once you have the blacksmith, so the leather upgrades are very much worthwhile for these guys. They also have skill drum, but skill drum is honestly not that great of an ability. There are very few times I would say you actually want to use it, though it does look kind of cool. Behind them, I've attached the Faolon Warriors. These guys are absolute damage dealers, but they share that same weakness. They have no armor, and they have no shield. They have 12 total defense, which is the same as the Border Guards, but they are completely, like, they will die to arrow fire very quickly. They don't take cavalry charges too well either. but they can hold their own in melee combat as long as they are kept in melee combat. They also frighten enemy infantry, so there is a bit of a morale factor to them, and they have good morale and impetuous morale response. So these are true warriors, just very, very weak to ranged combat, but they are actually quite strong, and they also have the curved swords, the phalanxes, which makes them quite a interesting unit, very unique, especially given that they are just absolute, kind of like berserkers, more or less. But they're a fun unit to have. They're not going to do you well defensively, and they're not going to do you well if they get shot to death. They're just going to die. But they can get many, many kills in combat. Next to them, I probably should have thrown these guys up in the front here, and in fact, I think I will, because they are not deserving of that kind of level of combat. These are the Starline Mercenaries, and I believe I probably talked about them in the pre-video when I went over the Mercenaries, but they are kind of a integral part of the Enedwaith roster also. They're just halberd units, 4 attack, 5 charge, 8 defense. Can't do a spear wall. Mostly are just good at fighting like enemy heavy armor. I've noticed that in general, halberds also have some niche uses fighting spearmen. I find them to do very well as an anti-spear unit for being infantry, so they have some advantages there. Honestly, not too much to write home about with these guys, just an extra unit, and they are your only halberd option, so at least they fill that kind of role in your roster. Next out, we have the Leodan unit. So we'll start with the Billmen. I guess, okay, so technically the Starline aren't the only halberds. You also have the Leodan Billmen, a much improved unit, and sorry, my dog is chasing his tail in the background here. 5 attacks, so 1 more attack, 1 more charge, and 14 total defense, a lot of that being in armor. You'll notice the 2 Leodan units very much focus on good arms and good armor, so use them as you would other halberds. Use them against cavalry. Just don't let them take the charge. Halberds aren't great at receiving charges, but they are very good at dealing with cavalry after they charge into something that's able to brace a bit better. Next to them are the Leodan Spearmen, the complementary force, the one that you probably would want the cavalry to charge. They come with shield wall. Again, I've talked about shield wall many times. It's an amazing ability to have, both on offense and for defensive purposes. Like taking a cav charge, they're not going to, none of these soldiers are going to die to a cav charge if they're in shield wall, and if they need to push into an enemy formation, shield wall is great for that. Jojo, hey, be quiet, buddy, be quiet. Sorry, he's chasing his tail in the background there. 5 attack, 18 defense, very high armor. Their only real weakness for these tiers would be armor-piercing units. And of course, don't put them in shield wall if you're fighting a bunch of catapults, others you're going to lose half the battalion. These guys are difficult to recruit because you do need to take Londair, which does mean that you need to defeat a city with 19 units in it, which can be quite challenging. And then in the final tier here for the infantry, we'll start with the Dubseath Elders. More of a support unit than anything. They inspire your nearby troops. They can also chant, which helps. They also frighten the nearby enemy infantry, and they have a bonus against mounts. Okay attack at 10, though only 47 soldiers, so they're not meant to be like a frontline unit. They're meant to keep your other units in the fight, so they pair well with the lower morale units like the Mokaini Toda over here. They'll keep them fighting just that bit longer while also providing a bit of fear towards the enemy as well, and they can function decently well to fend off enemy cavalry if they have a need to do that. They are a little bit let down by their low numbers, but they are meant to be a war chanter. They're meant to support your troops, keep them in the fight, and not so much to damage themselves. Next to them are the Mokaini Baxtoy, kind of the final unit here, and honestly my favorite unit of the whole roster. I loved Moot Keepers back in the previous versions, and I loved Moot Pikemen. I wish they were still here, but that's a bygone era. Mokaini and Baxtoy are basically the classic Moot Keepers, but with the throwing axes. So 9 total missile attack, 15 defense. They are good against armor with their missile attack, not with their melee. They only have 2 projectiles, but high accuracy. Great at both being a center frontline unit and throwing axes before engaging, or being a flanking unit to throw axes into the back of shielded enemies. Very multi-purpose. The only thing I wish they had that they don't is I wish they had shield wall. I think that would make them just a little bit better than they currently are, but they are a fantastic unit nonetheless for Enedwaith, and cool shield designs. I've always been a big fan of that. So that's pretty much it for our standard roster here on the infantry. Let's go to the archers now. So starting with these, I've included the skirmishers. We'll start with the Kiefe Huntsman. A 2 melee attack, they wield daggers, 3 missiles, 4 defense. Poor morale response. Decent number of missiles, though. They come with 24 and average accuracy with 170 meter range. These guys will probably make a bulk of your early game forces when it comes to archers. They're cheap, they can do damage that they need to do, they can help you with a lot of the low tier walled settlements that you're going to have to fight at, so good units to have. You're going to want to recruit lots of them, just don't expect them to, be absolute murder machines. They're not going to fare well against cavalry, but they're cheap and effective, kind of like woodland hunters, although they're not quite as good as the woodland hunters, unfortunately. They can also hide anywhere, so they have that advantage. Next to them, Mordag Fishermen, our first javelin units. These guys have replaced basically the Grey Flood Raiders from previous versions. They do have 7 missile attack, 3 melee, 4 total defense. They only have 4 javelins, but they do have high accuracy, 70 meter range. They are not armor piercing, but they are good against mounts with those javelins, so use them against lightly armored foes, throw them against cavalry, and they'll do very well for you. And they come with a very high number of soldiers here. And apologies for the cut there, my wife just came home, so my dog was barking his voice out at the garage door. So we're talking about the Mordag Fishermen, decent skirmishing unit here. I think we were pretty much covered on them, so we'll move on now to the next tier. We'll start with the Druidane Hunters. These guys are decent in melee with it's 3 melee attack, but they do have spears, so they're good against fighting cavalry. They can hide anywhere. 4 missile attack with decent accuracy. Their biggest advantage, though, is the fact that they have poison arrows, so they are able to reduce the morale of targets that they shoot at, which you can combine that with the Faolon Warriors or the Dubseath Elders to easily cause a lot of panic and make your enemies flee before you. So they have a lot of uses in that. Do note that they have no armor and only 4 defense skills, so they are a very squishy unit. They will die quickly to counter arrow fire, and even against cavalry, they do have the advantage against cav in melee, but they can take a lot of damage on the charge from cavalry. So use them primarily for their morale debuffing arrows. And it doesn't matter how many of them shoot, as long as one single arrow hits a unit, they will suffer the full morale debuff, just because it's medieval 2, contact effects. So even if they go down in number, even if you only have a couple of these guys in your army, if you only had 10 in a unit, they can still be very useful for that morale debuff ability. Next to them are the Dubseath Foresters. These guys also have the poison arrows, just like the Druidane Hunters. They do have 220 meter range with very high accuracy and 32 missiles, so they're basically your equivalent of a ranger unit, though with much lower stats than we typically see with rangers at only 5 melee and 9 total defense. I do note that they also can hide anywhere like other rangers are, so you have a lot of hide anywhere options for your missiles and your melee infantry. Finally, for the last skirmisher unit we have are the Mordag Skirmishers. These guys are a spear and javelin unit with only 5 melee, but good against mounts. Their javelins are effective against armor with 5 total missiles and 60 meter range with high accuracy. So 8 missile damage AP. In the late game, you'll probably have a decent number of these guys in your armies, either as your front line or on your flanks or as a secondary line to throw javelins. They can be very, very effective and are a significant improvement in killing power and quality than their lower tier variant, the Mordag Fishermen. So an excellent unit to have. I highly recommend recruiting as many of these as you can into your armies. Now we'll talk about the basic cavalry and the chariots first of all, and then we'll go into the Athamor unit. So starting off with the Fulani Herders, these guys, nothing too fancy about them. They do have 6 missiles with high accuracy, 70 meter range. They are armor piercing with 9 missile attack damage, though they only have 3 melee attack and 6 total defense. So they are quite weak in melee. Ideally, you would just use them to throw javelins, and then you can do hammer and anvil with them, but ideally you just use them to chase down riding troops and going after low tier stuff. They will die very quickly to enemy spears, enemy cavalry. They are not made to last long in prolonged combat. Behind them are the Falani War Wagons, kind of a glass cannon chariot unit, 8 melee, 11 missile attack, 14 defense. Their biggest advantage is that their javelins are body piercing and armor piercing with 11 total attack. So if you can get them onto the flank of a unit and throwing javelins, you should get quite a few kills, and then you can then charge into enemy units, and they function kind of like elephants. So as they're charging, they're actually going to get a lot of kills throughout that charge, but if they get stuck into melee, they will die very quickly, and they also can't take arrow fire that well. They only have 2 hit points and 10 total defense, so they are quite susceptible to being shot down, and even like enemy spears and pikes can take them down quite quickly. So more of a skirmish chariot than anything. You can use them in melee, but I would save their melee as like a last resort kind of option. But a fun unit to have, and they aren't that expensive to use either. And then finally we'll go into the, I guess the Athamor units. So we'll start off here with the basic ones. So we'll talk about the Enedwaith Guardsmen first of all. These are kind of like the Mordag Skirmishers, just upgraded, better stats. 7 melee, 10 missile attack, 22 defense. Good against armor with 60 meter range and 4 javelins. So in the late game, once you've completed your script, you're probably going to want to have armies that compose mostly of the Enedwaith Guardsmen and the other Enedwaithian Athamor units, but you can also pair these guys in with like the Mordag Skirmishers and kind of keep like a classic high javelin, like high number of javelin unit armies, because javelins in medieval 2 do a lot of damage and they can wipe units out very quickly. So they are hard to unlock. They require you to basically, take out Dunland, take all those other regions. I want to say it's like 15 regions or so. Plus the building does cost a bit and take a while to build, but it is definitely worth it. These guys aren't going to be like amazing top tier Uber units, but they are the best that your roster can field. Next to them, the Enedwaith Marksmen, giving you a decent kind of Gondor Archer level unit, 5 missile attack, 17 defense, high accuracy, and 28 missiles, so they are very solid archers. They also have a shield value to keep them alive. They are just a late game unlock, but they do give you, a decent armored archer corps. In the late game, you'd probably transition to using mostly Enedwaith Marksmen and Doobseath Foresters, saving the other units only for like emergencies when you just need to get numbers out there. The other unit would be the Enedwaith Cavalry. This gives you a proper lance or I guess it's a spear and shield cavalry unit. They are good against mounts, and they have a very good charge of 10. They're only 16 total defense, so they're not going to beat like other high tier cavalry, but they do give you a decent option as Enedwaith, and you are an underdog faction, so unlocking these is very, very rewarding. And then finally, your other unit for the Athamor script, and the one that gives you stakes, these are the Tirkra Soil. These guys have throwing axes and two-handed greatswords, 15 melee attack, 12 with their missiles, so they're very powerful there. They also frighten enemy infantry, so they are a bit of a fear factor causing unit. It's an excellent unit to have. Arguably your most uber elite unit, though that's not saying much because 15 and 21 aren't like amazing stats by any stretch of the imagination, but you aren't meant to be like a very powerful nation. Enedwaith is meant to be a challenging underdog, like middleman nation. So it's nice to have these unlocks in the late game, and it gives you like a real sense of progression, I feel. But you aren't gonna like go toe to toe. You're gonna have to be good with your total war tactics and using your javelins effectively to win like late game battles against other factions that are just going to field much better units than you can. But that is pretty much it for Enedwaith. I wish I could say more on them, but I just have not played them much in version 5 at this time. I've mostly just been playing other factions. So the next factions, though, that we're going to talk about, I am much more well versed in. And that would be the Dwarves of Erebor coming first. These will be next week, and then followed by the Dwarves of Ered Luin. So I'm looking forward to doing them. Erebor has been one of my favorite factions for a long time. Ever since I started playing the original Third Age mod, I would love to play the Dwarves. So I'm excited to actually cover the Dwarves of Erebor in the next video. And then also the Dwarves of Ered another one of my favorite factions. The only Dwarven faction I'm not a big fan of is Khazad Dûm, but that's just, it's more so to do with their scripts and stuff. Here we go. Let's look at this javelin volley get thrown into the Northmen archers. There they go. Oh, they're actually targeting the King's warriors. As you can see, those poison arrows coming in, causing the dwarves and the Northmen to already be shaken. So I look forward to doing next week's video, and I hope you guys are enjoying the mod. If you let me know if you liked this version of Enedwaith or the classic version of Enedwaith, because I think I'm a little more biased towards classic Enedwaith and their like very high number of javelin units. Like you had like lower quality javelin units arguably with like Angren Raiders and Greyflood Raiders, but they had like a lot of missiles. They were very, very accurate. I think the Greyflood Raiders had something like 6 javelins each, or maybe even 7 javelins each. And then the Angren Raiders, I think, had either 4 or 5 javelins that were armor-piercing. Though arguably, you know, not as good as the Mordag Skirmishers are, but they were still quite nice to have. Are these guys already ran out of ammo? Oh no, they're just going into melee. For whatever reason, the AI decides to throw them into melee. Oh, here goes the War Wagons, charging into Durin's Guard, and not lasting so well here. Definitely just getting cut down in melee. But as they throw their javelins, they do get quite a number of kills, and they can, when they get their charge animation, do a good amount of damage, but they're quite janky, honestly. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you like classic Enedwaith or version 5 Enedwaith more, I feel like I'm a little more partial to classic. Wow, look at that. They just got killed by friendly fire there and all those projectiles. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Enedwaith overview, and I will see you guys again next week as we talk about the Dwarves of Erebor.